you talking to them, I'll ignore them too. It's no skin off my nose. It's no biggie to me, and I genuinely just ignore them. So it's not they're not getting me angry. They're not winding me up at all. I just ignore them, and I genuinely do actually just ignore them. So they can spend hours shouting and swearing at me in a chat room, and I don't see any of it. So they're wasting their time.
I mean, I personally don't ignore anybody. I'd like to hope that even the most vulgar of people you can get a decent conversation out of them. But regardless of what they say about me, I don't ignore them. It's mainly because I enjoy or are very interested in watching human behaviour. I've said before that I can put certain trigger words on my article, which I know will attract certain people to come into the comments section. And let's be fair here, regardless of how distasteful sometimes this flame wars and attacks can be, they're very, very popular with readers. Certainly I've noticed from my statistics from WordPress, when there's somebody on my site being critical, maybe even being mildly abusive, the readership flies up and people are genuinely interested, because I think if they come into an environment where everybody's shaking hands and patting each other on the back and agreeing amicably with each other, it's rather a boring environment. So I do welcome a bit of a challenge, as long as it doesn't cross that line of vulgarity and being inappropriate. But yes, so I mean in Usenet the same, but you see this on Cola all the time. For those that don't know, it's CompOS Linux Advocacy, and it's a news group where it seems that it's just bickering without end is the best is the best way to describe it. But it does have, or used to have, some very decent Linux advocates in there, and it still does have some very nice people there who are constantly attacked by people with God knows what agenda, but purely just to try and disrupt the news group. And it certainly does make interesting reading from a position of looking at human behaviour and seeing people's posts and knowing, well, that comment's going to get this particular person responding because I know they've mentioned that word. Sorry, Gordon.
Yeah, I was going to say, this brings me on to another one. I'll need to try and find the link for the show notes. I think it was TechDirt again. I keep seeming to be pimping TechDirt, and I think it was TechDirt.
It's a great site. You shouldn't be embarrassed. I used to like some 10 times a day. I would link to it. Very happy because it's it takes an article which could be boring and it just hits the nail on the head when he does the analysis and puts the headline in a way which exactly summarizes what you want to say.
Right, when I explain this, I'm sure both of you will probably have read it. It might not have been TechDirt. I might be giving them credit when it's not due for once. But anyway, the story was about a lot of teenagers, when they were surveyed, didn't think that the comments and stuff like that on YouTube and Facebook were actually bullying. It was a difference in the way that parents in the older generation view, they keep looking at that and saying, oh, that's online bullying, my son, my daughter. They need to try and find ways to help protect them for that and help to get them to deal with that. But when you ask the kids themselves, that's just everyday sledging for them, and the language being bandied about and the accusations, they don't actually see it as bullying. So, I mean, that could just be, I mean, the intelligence level of the comments on YouTube is the type of thing I'm talking about. So, you know, that, I don't know. It could be just an age thing. I mean, I'm 37 now. I'll be 38 in January. So that may be tainting my sort of perspective on that. I just cannot be bothered with fights on YouTube, on Identica and IRC, and that. Life's too short. Seriously, life's too short. I mean, I'm all up for a debate to discuss things and share different opinions with people, but life's too short to be trading insults back and forth. I just can't be bothered with that. So, and I don't have any ego either about I've got to know what people are saying about me. I don't care. Essentially, if you're coming into a chat room and you're going to immediately start insulting me, well, I don't care. Your opinion means nothing to me, and I'll just put you in ignore. I don't care what you say. You know.
I mean, maybe it is an age thing. I'm not far behind you, Gordon. I'm 35. So, I mean, for me, like you say about ego, I certainly lost ego years ago. I've got more important things to think about, like family and kids, etc. And Yeah, it just doesn't bother me, and it's a shame that people haven't learned that there's far better and far more productive ways of putting your opinion forward or your views forward without having to resort to it. But what we're going to do, I think, Roy, if you're happy, we're going to start closing this off now and closing off this section on trolls and the show. If there's nothing pressing that we need to add, and what I want to end on is, I thought it'd be quite a nice idea, would be I'm going to ask you all for a tip on to a new blogger who's just starting his or her own blog on Linux, and give them one tip or one piece of advice. So I'll put you on the spot, Gordon. And what piece of advice would you give to a new blogger who's just created their first blog, say advocating Linux and free software?
Right. Since you're putting me on the spot, the one tip that I would give for that is think through, before you post a single thing, think through the various subjects that might come up, and then find a group of tags that are kind of generic enough that they would fit into. It's like broad categories that things would fit into. I mean, that way you don't have lots and lots and lots of tags, because that just confuses the hell out of people, and it makes it, if you've got, and also, I mean, if I do, for example, something about XFCE, I've got a tag, it's all caps, XFCE. I don't want to have a second one that's all lowercase XFCE, because they won't show up in the same thing. When I'm writing about XFCE, I'll use the same tag every single time. That way it bumps the count up for that, and it makes it easier for people to click. If they want to read everything about that tag, click on that and all the posts will come up, rather than them being spread out. So think through your tags first, and have a group of tags that you want to use, and just keep using those tags for your posts.
Well, very good on the spot answer, and it was my fault here, because that is a damn good piece of advice. And I'm going to ask you for one more, Gordon, but what we're going to look at is that in the context of trolls, boosters, and advocates that might pop up on your site. So for the new blogger, your one piece of advice to keep in mind if they attract trolls, boosters, or advocates to their comments section on one of their articles. What would be your one tip?
Smile, because they don't know what you know. That only works in person, obviously. No, I mean, what I do is I moderate. I put all my comments in moderation, and I don't. I mean, anything that's I've never had to reject a comment, and I'm honest enough to say, even if people don't agree with me and they're quite sort of strong in that opinion, and I'll publish it. I've no problem with that. I don't ever edit people's posts either. That's if you start correcting people's typos and things like that. That to me is, even although it's making them look better, that to me is sort of interference, and I won't ever do that. So I don't know. I mean, for attracting the trolls, I don't know. I mean, I try to be fair in my posts as well. I mean, I criticise Microsoft a lot, but it's about Microsoft's policies. I mean, there's plenty of perfectly good people working for Microsoft, but I try to be fair, and I try to see it from different perspectives, even if I've got a point to make that is one way. So yeah, I mean, try to be fair, try to be honest, and just give your opinion. I mean, a blog is a journal. It's not supposed to be news. It's your take on whatever's interested you on that angle. So, and don't necessarily conform either. Don't just write for the sake of writing. I mean, I read a post by Andy C. The other day that he says, well, he don't write for the sake of writing. If you've got nothing to say, don't just write a post. And even if a million people have covered the same subject as you, and you don't feel put off, just go for it as well. Put your own take on it, because a lot of people increasingly are wanting a personal take on something rather than a mainstream officially sanctioned. If it's something like a news story about WikiLeaks or whatever, or Linux market share or whatever. They increasingly don't want to go to the Times, they don't want to go to the BBC, they don't want to go to Sky or Fox or whatever.